Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. So today I have a very disappointing video for you. I'm disappointed. We're all just going to be disappointed together, I guess. So the video is about my August wrap up, and I'm going to be showing you the books that I attempted to read in August. I did not finish a single book in August. It is so sad. I really got into a reading slump because, as you can see from my previous video about the state of young adult literature, I kept finding books that just didn't have interesting plots or interesting characters or an interesting setting or whatever it was, an interesting writing style. It just really went downhill for me this last month. So I kind of got into a reading slump. I tried a lot of books. I did not finish pretty much all of them, but the best news is the newest book that I have started is finally going to give me hope for the future, and maybe I will get through a book in September. Okay, so the first book I attempted was one that was on my TBR list from last month, and it was called Five Kingdoms. It's a series called Five Kingdoms, and the first book's called The Sky Raiders by Brandon Mull. This is a series of 5 books that students here at school recommended to me, so I bought all 5 of them for the library because they just sounded so good. But then when I got them in, I realized that they're almost more like middle school level books. I mean, they can definitely be read by high schoolers too, but I don't know. It said that they're also, that this author wrote Fablehaven and the Beyonders series, and I've heard of both of those. So I know this author is very well known and very popular. However, this was just not the book for me. Maybe it was just the wrong timing. I don't know. I was in the mood though for some sort of kind of epic fantasy, which you'll see in a minute. I did finally discover one that I'm currently reading that is getting me out of my reading slump, but this was not the one. So it's about this boy named Cole, who it is a Halloween night, and he and his friends go trick-or-treating, and they go to this like scary haunted house thing that's supposed to be like a big event, and he goes down in the basement with some of his friends, and he realizes that the people in the basement are not there to do like an actual haunted house. They're actually kidnappers, but they're not just any kidnappers. They are from another like universe entirely, like another realm, another world, and from this place like the Five Kingdoms. And so he gets kidnapped by them. Well, actually he doesn't. All of his friends get kidnapped, plus all these other kids, like tons of kids in cages, and they take them all with them, and he follows along because he wants to help save them, basically, which it probably would have been smarter if he just stayed back and like, you know, I don't know, tried to help in his own world. But anyway, so he gets kidnapped, he gets there, they discover him pretty much immediately. He starts learning a little bit about this world that he's in. From what I gather, each book is going to focus on one of the 5 kingdoms, since there are 5 books. This world was sort of like it was called The Outskirts, and it was sort of, I don't know, kind of deserty, sort of, you know, not much there, very barren wasteland kind of place. But then he winds up being on this team called the Sky Raiders, and they raid these like castles that are supposedly abandoned, but could be really dangerous sometimes because they have weird creatures that live in them. Anyway, so that's where I stopped because it just wasn't really for me. It was very fast paced, so there was that. I would say that that's definitely a pro, but I don't know, it was just too middle schoolish, I guess, and I just didn't care about the characters or the world or anything like that. But for people that are into this, I could definitely see recommending it to more like a middle school level student or something like that. So I did not finish. I read about 150 pages, and that is where I stopped. Okay, the next book that I tried to read, I thought, well, this is just a fluke, you know, I'll try something that is more adult, because maybe it's these young adult books that are the problem. So then I tried to read The Library of the Unwritten. Okay, this book, I checked it out from the library, which is why I don't have it here with me, but this book, I can't even remember the author's name, but it'll be right here, hopefully on the screen. This book was about a librarian who works in hell, which is really weird. And it's this area where like all unwritten books go, basically. If they're unwritten, they live here, and their narrators can escape. And I was like, that sounds so cool. Like their protagonist can escape from the book, and the librarian will have to go and track them down. So sometimes, even though she's technically like dead, she'll have to return to Earth or go to other afterlives. Like they have to go to Valhalla at some point to try to track down some of these characters. So she has to go track down one of these protagonists. And in the meantime, I thought that was going to be the main part of the story, but actually there's a lot more to it. It kind of reminded me of Good Omens, if you've seen that show or read that book, because it also involves like an angel and he has to find this book that was supposedly written by the devil himself. And nobody thinks that this was really real, that he didn't write a book, but then maybe he did. And there's like this missing page that turns up and he has to try to find the whole book before everybody finds the whole thing, because it would be really powerful and it could end the world and all this stuff. And anyway, I thought it just sounded really cool. There was a lot going on. I did actually make it over halfway. I made it about 2/3 of the way when the thought occurred to me that I did not care what happened in the rest of the book. And if I did not care what happened, then what was the point? Honestly, it was kind of rushed because it tried to build like a whole new world really and tell you lots and lots of exposition, you know, and explain the setting and sort of how the world worked in this book. But because of that, it did it very quickly because it was a very short book, and there was no sequel yet. I think there's going to be. But it is sort of just, I mean, you can just read this one book. This story specifically doesn't continue. But I just thought that it was a little bit rushed, and even though the plot sounded really interesting, I, once again, just didn't really care about the characters. They weren't super likable or the plot or anything else. So gave up on that one about 2/3 of the way in. Okay, so the next book I tried to read, I thought I'm going to go back and try young adult again because maybe it wasn't, you know, clearly it wasn't just the young adult problem, because I tried this adult book and that didn't work either. So the next book I tried to read was Timekeeper by Tara Sim. This sounded so cool because it was set in Victorian London. It had some steampunk elements as well. It was about a boy that worked on clock towers, but clock towers kind of like rule the world in this weird alternate version of London. And that just sounded so cool to me. So I started reading it, and about 100 or so pages in, I realized that this book was really more about the characters. And that's fine, but I didn't really like the characters either. I thought originally the plot sounded cool, and that's what drew me in. But the plot, I mean, there really wasn't much to it. He was a clock tower mechanic that fixed things, and that was about it. But it was about how he met this clock tower spirit. People said they weren't real, but he discovered that there is this real spirit that lived in the clock tower. It was another boy, and they kind of have like a relation, like sort of a romantic relationship. But it was more about the characters' like backstory, and his dad's gone missing and he was trying to find his dad. And this actually all sounds interesting, I know, but it really wasn't in the book. I really, once again, did not care what happened to anyone. And I felt like the plot wasn't going to be the main focus, which is what I was really excited about, I guess. So anyway, I gave up on that one about 100 pages in. Okay, I also tried an audiobook this time, and it was a book that is always recommended on BookTube, and it is called The Final Empire, which is the first of the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I've never read a Brandon Sanderson book myself, but I know that they are incredibly popular, and he is a pretty prolific author. He has some pretty long, epic fantasy works and things like that, but people have said that this is a great series to first introduce yourself to him. So I started the audiobook of Mistborn, and I got about 10% finished, which I know is not a huge amount, but it is a pretty long book. So, I mean, 10% was a pretty decent chunk. And I did not care about anything that was happening or the characters. I hated the magic system. Everybody talks about how they love the magic system, but I thought it was super weird. So basically it involves people that ingest metals. They're called like mistings or something. I'm sorry if I get this wrong, because I know a lot of you love this book, but they ingest metals and like burn them inside of themselves to have different powers. And there's like 8 different metals or something, and each one allows you to sort of have a different power or control something different. And most people only have control over like one element, and that's why they're mistings. But a Mistborn has control over all 8 of them. Of course, some of the main characters, 2 of the main characters are Mistborns. And there's an older kind of protagonist and a younger girl protagonist who is just now finding out about her powers. So it could even be read by young adults because it is very like coming of age kind of story as well. But I didn't care about the characters, and I thought the writing was so bland. I mean, it was so straightforward. And people say that about Brandon Sanderson's writing. But I'm trying another one of his books now that I'm about to talk about, and it is so much better, infinitely better. So I know that most people love Mistborn. It has a great review on, great score on, Goodreads, but I just couldn't get into it. It was not the book for me. I am so sorry to all the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn fans out there, but it just didn't do it for me. And finally, the book that got me out of my reading slump. So how this happened, I've been watching a lot of booktube videos, like a lot. Like last week it said on my screen time that I watched 16 hours of booktube. Well, or YouTube in general, but it was mostly booktube with a few Disney videos thrown in there. Anyway, so I decided that I needed to read some books that were highly recommended by other booktubers, especially fantasy novels. Okay, so this book, I went to the library and they had it. So right now I just have the library copy, but I'm probably going to wind up buying it, assuming it does get a little more faster paced than it is now. But it is this giant epic called The Way of Kings, also by Brandon Sanderson. So I decided that if I did not like Mistborn, that this was going to be my last shot at a Brandon Sanderson novel. If I had not liked this one, I would probably never try Brandon Sanderson again because I know that his writing style would not be for me. But this one so far is amazing. So this is where I'm at. I'm a little over a fourth of the way finished, a little over 250 pages because it is 1,001 pages, which is really long. I think they're all at least 1,000 pages. There are 3 of them so far in this series called the Stormlight Archive. People love this series. I mean, it's up there with like Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, things like that for how people talk about it. It is truly like an epic. It's his version of like Lord of the Rings, that kind of thing. Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. It's like his fantasy epic. So it is set in a high fantasy world, and it is, so far, the world itself is the most intriguing part. It does go back and forth between multiple characters' points of view, but not near as many as in Game of Thrones. So I actually prefer having more characters because I get bored with just a couple. So like the whole first part of this book, part 1, was just 2 characters back and forth. Now we've got 3 characters back and forth, so and 2 of them are new, so that's at least a little bit better. But sometimes I do wish that there were even more characters' points of view because I feel like I need a lot going on in the story. I don't like it to just sort of have one plot. I want a lot of subplots, I guess. But basically, this book is about a world where storms are obviously important because it's called the Stormlight Archive, but storms are very unpredictable and they are so severe that they can cause, whole towns to be destroyed, things like that. So the whole world is built sort of around sheltering themselves from these storms. That's just a very small part of it right now, but there's also like magic that comes from like storms, I guess. I'm not really sure yet. There's like these spheres that have stormlight inside of them and things like that. But the back of this, I just have to read you one part about the 4 main characters. Sort of. I don't know. I don't know if one of them is really a main character yet or not. But it says there are 4 whom we watch. The first is the surgeon. So his name's Kaladin, and I know everybody loves Kaladin. That's all they talk about. But I don't love him yet. We'll see. The first is the surgeon, forced to put aside healing to become a soldier in the most brutal war of our time. The second is the assassin, a murderer who weeps as he kills. The third is the liar, a young woman who wears a scholar's mantle over the heart of a thief. The last is the high prince, a warlord whose eyes have opened to the past as his thirst for battle wanes. The world can change, surge biting and shard wielding can return. The ways of ancient days, or the magic of ancient days, can become ours again. These 4 people are key. One of them may redeem us, and one of them may destroy us. I mean, how cool does that sound? So this is definitely what hooked me, was the world, the characters, basically everything in it. And so far, the world building is extreme. I mean, he has a lot of history. There's stuff at the beginning that takes place like thousands of years ago. There's a lot of like maps and names of places. And one of my favorite parts actually are these little characters, these little creatures called Spren. And there's like all different types of them. So there's wind Spren that appear that are like in the wind, I guess. But there's like pain Spren. If you're in pain, then pain Spren appear around you. It's almost like they're attracted. These Spren are attracted to different things. Like, I think there was one even called like logic Spren or something when you're thinking. And I can't remember all of them now, but basically it's like anything you could think of, there's a type of Spren for it. So if it was like victory Spren or something like that, if you're winning, then they appear around you or something. So I just thought that was a really cool, unique idea. But there's tons of stuff like that in this. The world building is awesome, and I cannot wait to read this book some more next month. And this whole series, like there's 3 of them out right now. The 4th one, I believe, comes out in November. It is going to be a much longer series, though, so I do plan on continuing it as of right now, and right now it is getting me out of my reading slump, so yay. Okay, so those are all the books that I mostly attempted to read. I mean, I clearly didn't read any of them. I didn't finish them in August, but I'm hoping to have a much more successful September. Even though school is starting, our school starts on September 8th, I think that I will still have plenty of time in the evenings to read, and I'm hoping that I will be out of my reading slump by reading the Stormlight Archive. So thanks, guys, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.